All right, so this is Apple Tree's bunny bottoms with a gusset. They're, I like to call them joggers, but they are a nice loose fitting pant that grows with the child, and they do have a gusset. I like the gusset because my market is cloth diapering. The very first step, obviously cut out your pattern pieces, but after that you have your gusset, and I always start with the gusset. Now I mark the centers of the front and of the back, and you can tell the back because, see if you can see it, the back has more of a curve to it and the front is more flat. But if that is difficult for you, then I recommend the front marking it with a pink and the back marking it with a blue, like typical. I also mark the center of my pants so that way I don't have to go looking for it. The back of the pants will have a rise where the front will have a dip. So we want to make sure that we have the back of the pants and the back of the gusset. We're going to line up those marks and we're going to clip it. Now I'm going to walk both pieces together, no stretching at all, but I have a convex curve and a concave curve, and I'm trying to get them together. So I'm going to clip that in place, and I'm going to go the other way and do the exact same thing. So I'm going to very gently, no stretching, line up those pieces so that they fit perfectly together. And again, clip it. So now that I have the front, middle, and back clipped, I'm going to serge. Now I apologize, my kids are noisy. Hopefully it's not too much noise. All right. So as you're sewing, these pieces tend to come apart because one is concave and one is convex. So we're going to make sure that they stay together just by gently aligning those. Sometimes you have to kind of like make a curve to get them to fit perfectly together. But just be aware of that. It's nothing worse than thinking that you've got it and it turns out a big part of it was missed. So just take it slow. There's no need to rush in this area. Again, it really stinks if you miss it. So now at this point, if you do not want to do cover stitching, you can go straight on to the next step, and it's beautiful and it'll hold nicely. But because my market is cloth diapering, I like to give it a cover stitch over the top just to reinforce those heavy, high stress areas. But again, like I said, if you choose not to, it's beautiful and you don't need to. It's just for my market, I do. So at this point, you would go ahead and cover stitch it and then move on to the next step. I've done that with another pair. So like I said, I did just a simple cover stitch over those seams so that they're laying flat and that when they get pulled with high stress, you've got 1, 2, and then the other 2 on the inside from your serger. So you've got 4 sets of needle threads holding the seam together. So nothing's going to come apart. So now we have the front of the gusset marked, and we have the front of the pants marked. So we're going to put those together just like before when we did the back. Pin those in place. And then with this one, instead of walking from the middle, I'm actually going to start at the ankles. So at this part. So line these 2 ends up and then follow it again without pulling at all and just clip where the gusset begins. Okay, so that's where we're going to clip it, and we're going to do that on both sides. Okay, again, no stretching. And clip it in place. Now, when you're sewing, if you sew with the gusset part on the top this way, you can see where the gusset is, so it's a lot easier to not leave behind the gusset. Where if you sew it this way, you're kind of almost sewing blind, and you're never quite sure if you get this little area where there's the 3 pieces that come together, which seems to be pretty problematic for some people. So I like to do it where you can actually see it. Also, it'll make it so the right side of your stitches is shown when you serge. I'm sorry, when you cover stitch. So let's go ahead here, line everything up again. For this one, there is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I sew right at the edge of my knife. So here you can see that things are kind of bunching up. Again, we have concave and convex. So we're going to do the same thing that we did on the first side. We're going to line this up, but then we're going to spend a lot of time going very slow over this area. You can see that it's not quite lining up, and if I just stick with the edge, I'm going to miss all of this fabric. So I need to pull this down and kind of almost straighten it out and just, I don't want to say force it because I'm not forcing anything, but you kind of have to just make it go. I wish I had a better way to describe that. Again, matching that convex curve with the concave curve and stitching that along. We're coming up on the other side of the gusset where we have that other problematic area. I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to use, I don't know if you can see, no, you can't see, these threads that are sticking out right here, left over from when I sewed the gusset on. You can pull those to kind of help match those edges. So that's what I'm doing where you can't quite see it. Go over that difficult area and then come down to the end. Clip my threads. And again, if you choose not to cover stitch your gusset, you could just move on to the next step. You don't have to cover stitch. If you choose to cover stitch, it will give some added strength. But otherwise, it looks beautiful. It lays nicely on both sides of that gusset. And from here, you can move on to the next step, or go ahead and put in some cover stitching. I have another pair that I did do cover stitching, and I do cover stitching on the entire inseam. So both sides of those the gusset and the entire inseam. So from here, we're gonna line it up like pants. So front or right sides together, just like normal pants. And we're gonna do our sides. Now I'm gonna insert my tag here because these are for my business. But let's see here. And when I insert my tag, I just kind of shove it in there. I'm paying attention to the ends, so I'm matching up those ends and kind of not quite stretching, but keeping it nice and flat and keeping those edges lined up really well. And just with my fingers, I'm holding that end. So now, if you've seen my other videos, you'll know that I like to make sure that all of my seams face towards the back. So this is the front side, and this is the back side. So I'm always going to sew with my front side up, so that way my seams can always face with the correct way, or the top of the stitching. And I like to call this one the right side of the stitching, versus this is the wrong side of the stitching. And whenever I put my bands on, I always make it so that the right side folds back. So in order to do that, I start at the waist on one side, and when I go to the other side, I'm going to start at the ankle, so that way I can make sure that my seams are all facing towards the back. And again, I'm lining up these seams so that they line up perfectly. And without stretching, I'm just kind of pulling it so that it lines up perfectly. And at this point, you are ready for bands. I'm just trimming my edges here, trimming all the seams off. And I gotta find those bands. All right. So I'm going to do the waistband, and then I'll do the ankles in a separate video because I have a special method for those. So I'm going to take my right sides together, fold it in half, and then send it through. I'm going to take my threads, so make sure that my needles are down. With my needles down, I'm going to lift my presser foot and tuck my tails so that way that those threads don't come undone inside the garment. So you can see that my tails are secure on that end. So I'm going to go to the far right side and open it up. And we have a nice, beautiful seam, but we only have one edge instead of two edges to deal with on the inside as far as seams go, or stitching or serger threads. Now I'm going to grab the edge where the two pieces come together, mark that as the middle back, and mark the middle front. We're going to mark the middle front with pink and the middle back with blue. Now, because it's easier sometimes to do it before we get it into the garment, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark my sides also. And I typically mark my sides with yellow. So I'm just doing that right now, and I'm lining the front and back up, and then just finding the middle on the side. And I'm going to mark the side again with a yellow. So my band is ready to go, but my pants have not yet been marked. So I'm going to take the two side seams and I'm going to line those up. You can use the nesting method, or you can just visualize them and make sure that they're lined up perfectly. Mark the blue with the back with blue and the front with pink. And this is not directional, but if it were directional, what I would do is I would look at it. So this is the part that's going to be sewn to the garment, and this is the finished side. And so I would just look at it this direction and determine, is this right side up or is this upside down? If it were upside down when I'm looking at it this way, then I would give it a flip, and I would flip it over, and I would look at it again. And I would say, okay, this looks like it's more right side up. Look at this butterfly. It's right side up. So we're going to go with this direction. Always just double check in case there's something that's really odd or off about your print. So actually it looks like all of these butterflies are the right way this time. So then we're going to slide it into the garment, matching up pink with pink, yellow on the sides, and blue in the back. And when we get to the sides, make sure that you put the right side facing towards the back of those side seams. Same on the other side. Now again, because this is my own piece, I am going to add my tag, and I put my tag in the center of the back. Now, oops, sorry. they are satin, and because they're satin, they tend to slide with the feed dogs underneath. So I'm going to put it a little off center because I know that it's going to pull my tag this direction. So I'm going to slide it a little further this way. So that way once it gets pulled, it's more closer to being centered. Clip that in place. And I'm going to start at the side at a yellow. Okay, so we have the band and we have the pant. So we're going to stretch the band until it lines up with the pant without without stretching the pant at all, just stretching the band. Okay, make sure all 3 pieces are lined up, and that's where we're going to start to serge. So a couple stitches, you can remove your clip, and again, this is the pant, this is the band. I'm going to stretch the band until it lines up with the pant. So here we are with the tag. I'm going to do my stretching before I pull my clips, and I'm going to pull my clips one at a time. So again, stretching the band, not the pant. I'm going to pull only the first clip, stitch a couple in, and then pull my second clip. So that way, hopefully the tag will go in there and be somewhat centered. Again, pulling the band, not the pant. Okay, I'm going to sew off. I've got my needle threads are lining up. I'm going to sew off and then separate my needle threads from my looper threads. Pull those out and just give it a couple overhand knots. And then on the next video, I'm going to do the leg bands. Unfortunately for this specific pant, I was going to do a different method. So I'm going to post that in a separate video. But from here, your waistband is finished, and you can go ahead and put your leg cuffs on. And I will show you that in the next video.